In the grand theatre of the stars, what happens when the most dangerous weapon is peace itself? In the cold, vast emptiness of the universe, where stars are born and die in silence, the Vorthak ruled with an iron fist. These beings, known for their almost godlike powers and unimaginable technology, dominated the galaxy. Their ships, vast and intricate, glided effortlessly through the void, their weapons capable of wiping out entire civilizations in mere moments. The Vorthak were conquerors, and the galaxy was their domain. No species was too powerful for them, no force too great. For millennia, the Vorthak waged war across the stars. Their wars were not small skirmishes, they were apocalyptic conflicts, where entire species were driven to the brink of annihilation. The Vorthak had seen it all, races rising, fighting, and eventually falling, destroyed by their own brutal nature. There was no room for weakness in the Vorthak's empire. Survival was reserved for the strong. They had crushed the forces of the galaxy one after another, watching as civilizations fought for control, only to burn themselves out in the fires of conflict. For the Vorthak, this was how the universe worked. War was a natural force, just like gravity, pulling everything toward destruction. It was a constant in the vastness of space. And as they watched from the depths of their mighty citadels, it seemed that every species they encountered followed. The same pattern: fight, bleed, and eventually perish. But then something unexpected happened. The Vorthak, so sure of their supremacy, discovered a species that did not obey the laws of war: humanity. At first, humanity seemed like another insignificant species, unworthy of serious attention. The humans were weak, primitive, struggling to crawl beyond their own planet's atmosphere. Their ships were rudimentary, their technology outdated. They barely managed to put together a meager fleet that could only dream of matching the Vorthak's advanced weaponry. To the Vorthak, humans seemed like nothing more than a fleeting distraction, a species on the brink of self-destruction. There was a chaotic mess of primitive bombs and outdated guns. But there was something about humanity that intrigued them. The Vorthak had long perfected the art of war. They had destroyed entire civilizations with their advanced technology and flawless strategy, but they had never encountered a species like humanity before. These humans, despite their primitive technology, fought with an intensity and passion that felt almost reckless. They were impulsive, emotional, and often seemed driven more by instinct than reason. Yet, despite their seemingly boundless aggression, there was something different about them. Humanity had something that none of the other species in the galaxy possessed. The Vorthak couldn't put their fingers on it at first, but as they studied humanity more, they began to realize what it was. The humans could stop fighting. At the height of war, when victory seemed within their grasp, humanity would lay down their arms, not because they had been beaten, but because they chose to stop. They chose peace. This was something the Vorthak had never seen. To them, war was the natural state of the galaxy. Victory was achieved through complete and utter destruction. If a species was weak, they were destroyed. If they were strong, they were absorbed. But humans, these chaotic, impulsive beings, could choose peace. They didn't just fight for survival, they fought for something more. They fought for something that could end wars altogether, and that was terrifying. The more the Vorthak observed humanity, the more they began to notice a terrifying truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons, nor their technology, nor even their ability to wage war. It was their ability to stop. The Vorthak, like all conquerors, had long viewed war as a tool, a way to assert dominance, to maintain control. The strong survive and the weak perish. But humanity was different. They didn't need to conquer to dominate. They didn't need to annihilate entire populations to prove their strength. They had a power that the Vorthak could never understand. The power to stop fighting, to choose peace over destruction. For the Vorthak, peace was an afterthought, something that came only after the war was won. It was a consequence of dominance, a product of victory, but humanity could achieve peace without war, without bloodshed. They could sit down at the table with their enemies, reach an agreement, and walk away without a single shot being fired. The Vorthak had never seen such a thing. They watched as humans fought against each other, against themselves. And yet, when the conflict reached its peak, when every possibility for destruction seemed to be on the table, humanity would halt. They would reach across the battlefield and offer the olive branch. They would negotiate, compromise, forgive. It wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of immense strength. The strength to walk away from war, to resist the urge to annihilate, to choose the hard path of peace. At first, the Vorthak dismissed it as an anomaly. Maybe it was just a fluke, a rare occurrence. But it wasn't. Time and again, the humans demonstrated this uncanny ability to step back from the brink, and each time the Vorthak witnessed it, the more it shook their understanding of what it meant to be powerful. In the heat of battle, humanity could have crushed their enemies, could have annihilated everything in their path. But they didn't. Instead, they chose to negotiate. They chose to forgive. They chose peace. The Vorthak couldn't understand it. They had never seen anything like it. Every other species they had encountered fought to the end, until there was nothing left to fight for. But the humans, they didn't need to fight. To win, they could win without lifting a finger, simply by choosing peace. And as the Vorthak watched this, they realized something. Humanity had a weapon that was stronger than anything they had ever known. It wasn't a weapon of destruction or domination. It was a weapon of restraint, a weapon of choice, the ability to choose peace, even when all logic and instinct said to fight. That was humanity's greatest strength, and that was a force the Vorthak didn't know how to fight. The more the Vorthak pondered this truth, the more they began to understand how deeply humanity had altered their perception of the universe. The galaxy was a place where survival was achieved through strength. The strongest species dominated, and the weak were left to wither. It was a simple, unyielding rule that had governed every civilization, every war, for eons. And yet, the humans had done something that shook that foundation. Humanity didn't follow the rule of the strong. They had created a new rule. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is stop fighting. The Vorthak had spent their entire existence perfecting war. Their fleets were unmatched, their armies unstoppable. They had destroyed civilizations without remorse, without hesitation. For the Vorthak, the greatest test of a species was its ability to fight and to win. But humanity had proven something that defied all logic. They had proven that peace could be chosen, not as a last resort, but as a strategy. This realization hit the Vorthak like a shockwave. The more they studied humanity, the more they understood the gravity of what they had found. Humanity wasn't just another species to conquer, to absorb, or to destroy. They were something else entirely. They were the first species in the history of the galaxy that could choose peace in the face of war. The Vorthak were not prepared for this. They had always believed that power came from the ability to destroy, to dominate, but the humans had shown them that true power came from the ability to stop, to choose not to fight. And this truth was dangerous, because if humanity could choose a peace, they could choose it against the Vorthak as well. The Vorthak had long thought they were the ultimate conquerors, the masters of war, but in the face of humanity's strength, they began to see that they were not invincible. They were not unassailable. Humanity had a power that could bring the galaxy to its knees. The power to choose peace was not just a weapon, it was a threat, and the Vorthak realized, far too late, that they had underestimated humanity. The realization that humanity could simply choose peace at will began to weigh heavily on the Vorthak. They who had spent centuries mastering the art of war, were now faced with a species that was not only willing to fight, but capable of walking away from conflict when victory was within their grasp. The Vorthak had always believed that survival, dominance, and power came from the ability to destroy, to annihilate, to conquer. To them, peace was an afterthought, a consequence of a victorious war. It was only ever attained when one side had nothing left to fight with. The strongest survived, and the weak perished. That was the rule of the galaxy until humanity entered the picture. Now this new rule was beginning to haunt them. Sometimes the greatest victory is the ability to choose peace. For a species like the Vorthak, who had woven destruction into every fiber of their being, this idea felt like a paradox. Power wasn't supposed to lie in restraint, it was supposed to lie in domination. Yet there it was, standing before them in its most human form, a simple, stubborn refusal to continue fighting when the end was within reach. Humanity's capacity to walk away from war wasn't just a strange anomaly, it was a fundamental disruption of the universe's balance. What had always been true for the galaxy no longer seemed so. War wasn't just a tool to conquer, it had become the natural state of existence. The Vorthak, the masters of this brutal law, had ruled by it for millennia, using their overwhelming strength to maintain peace by sheer force. But humanity had shown them something else, a way of achieving peace without bloodshed, without even the necessity of conflict. As the Vorthak's empire stretched across the galaxy, they had never stopped to consider the true cost of endless war. Sure, they had wiped out countless civilizations, each one crumbling before their might. The Vorthak's battleships, their dreadnoughts, their citadels, all symbols of a terrifying, unyielding force. Yet, for all the lives they had crushed, the stars they had conquered, the one thing they had never truly understood was the cost of perpetual conflict. And now, standing before the human race, they realized that this cost was more than just the destruction of life. It was the erosion of something deeper, the soul of the galaxy itself. Humanity was not defined by its ability to destroy, but by its ability to stop. The more the Vorthak observed humanity, the more they came to understand this strange, beautiful contradiction. Humans could be driven by the most primal instincts, but in the end, they had the remarkable ability to choose something other than war. To them, victory didn't always mean annihilation. It could mean compromise, negotiation, and yes, sometimes, even forgiveness. The implications of this discovery shook the Vorthak to their core. Could they too learn to stop? Could the warlords of the Vorthak, who had ruled with such unyielding power for so long, ever truly choose peace? Or was their very existence, their culture, too tied to the ravages of war for them to ever relinquish it? Humanity had something the Vorthak could never understand, an unwillingness to let conflict define them. This was the true lesson. Humanity had shown them that there was another way, that sometimes true strength lies in knowing when to end the fight. The Vorthak were not prepared for this, nor were they ready to face the consequences of their own actions. In their quest for eternal domination, they had become blind to the fact that peace could be a weapon too. The galaxy, once a chaotic battleground ruled by the Vorthak's iron fist, was on the verge of a seismic shift. The winds of change had started to blow, and humanity was at the center of it all. The Vorthak, who had long seen themselves as the unchallenged masters of the galaxy, now found themselves confronting an uncomfortable truth. They were no longer the only force capable of shaping the future. Humanity's influence was growing, steadily, inexorably, because humanity had done something that no other species had ever managed. They had found a way to achieve peace without the need for violence. The Vorthak watched as humanity's presence spread across the stars, not through conquest, not through war, but through the power of diplomacy and negotiation. As strange as it seemed to them, peace became humanity's weapon of choice. It wasn't an easy weapon to wield, but it was far more effective than any weapon of mass destruction. And it wasn't just about negotiation. It was about understanding, about finding common ground, even in the most impossible of circumstances. The galaxy began to shift as species from across the stars began to learn from humanity. What had once been a place where the strongest ruled by brute force was now a galactic community, however imperfect, where the capacity for restraint and the choice to stop fighting began to shape the future. No longer were entire civilizations destroyed in the wake of intergalactic warfare. Now there was the possibility of peace, even if it was hard-won. But this shift was not without its challenges. As the Vorthak watched, their empire began to unravel. Their own warriors, once so loyal to their cause of domination, began to question the very foundation of their existence. What was the point of endless war? What was the purpose of subjugating other species if the ultimate goal wasn't to destroy, but to find a way to coexist? The more they saw of humanity's peaceful resolve, the more the cracks in the Vorthak Empire deepened. For the first time in millennia, the Vorthak began to wonder if their way was the only way, or if perhaps humanity had discovered something far more profound. And yet, despite the growing realization that humanity's path was the way forward, the Vorthak could not escape their history. Their empire was built on conquest, on the relentless march of war. They had mastered the art of annihilation, and the concept of peaceful negotiation felt foreign to them, alien even, as they grappled with the new reality that peace could be as powerful as war. They found themselves torn between their old ways and the possibility of something different. But this conflict was not just taking place within the Vorthak. Across the galaxy, the other species watched and waited, unsure whether humanity's rise was a blessing or a threat. Some saw humanity's peaceful approach as a threat to their own power, fearing that it would destabilize the delicate balance of the galaxy. Others saw it as the dawn of a new era, one where the old ways of war and dominance were cast aside in favor of something better. As the Vorthak retreated into their citadels, trying to maintain control of their crumbling empire, they were left to ponder one final question. Could peace truly replace war? Could humanity's way of choosing peace, even in the face of conflict, become the new standard of the galaxy? For the first time in their history, the Vorthak realized they did not have the answer. They had always been the unquestioned rulers of the galaxy, but now they found themselves at the mercy of a species that could do something they had never been able to do: choose not to fight. As the galaxy moved forward into this new era, the Vorthak were left to watch from the shadows. They were no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. Humanity had shifted the balance of power, not through brute force, but through something more powerful, the ability to choose peace. And so, the galaxy began to enter a new age, one where peace was not just a fleeting ideal, but a lasting reality. The Vorthak, though they may have lost their supremacy, were given the opportunity to learn the most important lesson of all. The true measure of power is not in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to choose when to stop. As humanity's influence spread further, it became clear that the galaxy had entered a new era, an era where war was no longer the default and peace had become the ultimate weapon. In the end, the greatest victory humanity could claim was not in any battle fought, but in the choice to end the fight altogether. Peace was no longer just an option, it was a strategy, a weapon in its own right, and with that, humanity had changed the course of the galaxy forever. But the galaxy would soon learn peace is just one of humanity's choices, and choice is the ultimate power. If this story made you rethink what true power means, subscribe. Because the Dominion has countless more lessons from the darkest corners of the galaxy.